Scroll and see.
Good morning to all of us in the United States, and welcome and good evening and happy Diwali. So many things to celebrate on this third day of our international conference. Thank you all for being here. We are coming to the closing of our conference. It's been so joyous and so amazing. A couple thank yous I'd like to give out. A shout out to all of our volunteers, so many great people who have all made this work, to our service crew hosts that have been in every single workshop, to Callie Almond for bringing them all together and matching them with people. It's been amazing to see it all come together. Special shout out to Anna Miano, who has done amazing things with our newsletters and keeping everybody informed. It's really, she's been invaluable and incredibly awesome. Just couldn't do it without her. And thanks to our board for being supportive and making this happen. When we pivoted and decided to do a virtual conference, they were fully behind it, and really appreciate all of them doing that with me. So here we are. Don't forget that we have 2 sessions live still today. And you can pick from all those workshops. We already have our first day up, so on-demand sessions are available. Yesterday's sessions will be getting up there today or tomorrow, so that process went a lot quicker than we thought it would. So if you missed Activate, you can go back and see it now. You can find all of those in the on-demand sessions button. So on your attendee dashboard, scroll down to that spot, on-demand sessions, they're all in there. We have our closing session this afternoon for those of us in the United States, but closing session with Dan Miller of Fifth Pillar, one of our sponsors. That's going to be exciting at the end to this amazing event. So thank you, Dan, for doing that. And I just wanted to point out that we have forums happening. And so the forums are for you all to share information, to chat together, but there's a special one in there called Trailblazers. And we really want to use that one to highlight people that have done amazing things, organizations that have shifted and come up with things, but that is for you all to celebrate each other. So if you haven't had a chance to go to that one and look and see what's been happening, add to it. That's a great way to showcase all of our amazing work that we've done in the past year. Whew. So Oh, and don't forget we have evaluations. So our workshops evaluations, that's important information for our presenters to get. Again, your attendee dashboard. You can find the workshop evaluation, and we've modified it a little bit from the first day. So your name will not be given to presenters. That's just information that we need for you to log in. And also there's a drop-down menu for workshops. So you don't have to remember the name of your workshop. So don't forget to go in and do that. Our presenters love that feedback. Thank you, Bobby Beal, for mentioning that and we made that happen. And so again, we will have a evaluation for the entire conference too. We want to know how this worked for you, what things were great, what things maybe need adjustments. It's really important that we get that feedback so we can do a better job for next year. You will get that overall conference evaluation in an email, and it will be either tomorrow or on Monday. So please look out for that. Again, really important information that we need to make sure that this conference is what you all want and need. Great. So right now we have our Marina Ewald and Kurt Hahn honoree address. And I'd like to share a little information about who Marina Ewald and Kurt Hahn were. And we will begin with a video. And for the introduction, we have Lori Frank.
Hello, everyone. It has been so wonderful to see everyone these past couple of days and to reconnect, especially now. Although this platform works, there will be a time when we can gather together in a physical space to do what we do so well: share, play, laugh, and learn together, and to feel that sense of being in our professional homes. I am Lori Frank, and I'm speaking to you from the ancestral lands of the Sauk Fox and the Ho-Chunk, which means people of the sacred voice. It is my honor and privilege to introduce our Marina Ewald Kurt Hahn recipient, Vishwas Parchuri. I've known Vishwas for more than 20 years. We've worked together, traveled together, and had countless deep conversations about life, how the world works, and of course, about all aspects of experiential ed. I usually come away from these conversations with new ideas, thoughts, and insights. I find that the depths of my thinking is greater and richer with each conversation. Now, one of the things Vishwas and I like to do is to share thinkers, theorists, and researchers that inform and broaden our work. So I'd like to share my screen and introduce to you, or reintroduce to you, Maxine Greene. Maxine Greene talked about how people need to become more wide awake and conscious and aware. And to do this, we must look from a variety of vantage points because reality is not objective, but subjective. It lives within each person's perspective. So the exploration from a variety of perspectives gives each of us an opportunity to gain a sense of the world's reality. So I'm going to use the wisdom from Maxine Greene as a framework to introduce Vishwas to you. I'd like to create a picture of him as an educator from 4 perspectives. First, how Vishwas has been influenced by Indian culture. This is the air he breathes, the water he swims in, his foundations and frames of reference. I'd like to share with you the influence of philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti on Vishwas as a person and as an educator. And Vishwas, I have to confess that while we were on our Zoom meetings, Madhvi and I were chatting behind your back. And she was so gracious to send me pictures and words from your students. And so I'd like to share some of those experiences of being a student of Vishwas's through their words. And finally, I'd like to share my perspective of Vishwas as my colleague, co-collaborator, and friend. And this last one I'll scatter throughout this introduction, as well as touch on a final point or two at the end. The culture in which Vishwas is steeped is an Indian Hindu culture. Now, I will never fully understand it, of course, but I can offer some observations and appreciations. And one is the idea of educator as guru. Guru comes from Hindu and Buddhist religions and is a Sanskrit term for a teacher, guide, expert, or master of a certain knowledge or field. Now, I've always had a casual knowledge of the term, and in my background, from my frame of reference, I found it to be rather arrogant. But what I've learned over these many years is that a guru signifies a special relationship between teacher and student. There's a high level of respect in this relationship. Now, the way I make sense of it is through what Vygotsky calls the more knowledgeable other. In our lives, we need people with whom we can connect and who have a depth of experience, understanding, and wisdom that we cannot create on our own. We then build on that and become a more knowledgeable other over time for other people as we gain in experience and wisdom. And in this way, being a guru is part of a cycle of teaching and learning through relationship. Now, in Vishwas's India, there's an approach to learning that lies in stark contrast to my experience, and I'd like to share a few observations. In the US, we develop rituals through morning meetings, group time, and community building to embellish our teaching and learning. In India, ritual is a seamless part of the process. In the US, we encourage curiosity by asking questions through inquiry-based instruction. From an Indian perspective, teaching and learning do not exist without questions. Now, in my experience in the US, we want to be efficient. We want to get it done. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it tends to be very linear. In India, my experience is that storytelling is an important part of the process and can be quite cyclical. And finally, in the US, we start workshops either on time or just a little bit late and then try to end early. People love having an extra half hour or so of time that they weren't counting on. In the US, many times time is a commodity and we talk about being on time. Workshops in India start when you're ready and they end when you're done. And then you go out for tea afterwards. In India, I learned what it meant to be in time instead of on time. Another influence for Vishwas was Jiddu Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti was a philosopher and contemporary of Ewald and Hahn. Like them, he espoused an alternative view of education, which included a freedom from fear and emphasis on personal responsibility, a relationship between teacher and student that is very different from the guru-student relationship. The schools that were founded under the Krishnamurti Foundations emphasize the unfolding of consciousness of individuals' relationship to one another. The focus of these schools is about cultivating the total human being. So like Ewald and Hahn, there was a larger focus on the whole person. Ewald and Hahn's methodologies included changing the world through an outward connection to others with personal experience and challenge. In this way, people changed through their connection with others. Krishnamurti's methodologies included going inward and changing the self first. Vishwas had a family connection to Krishnamurti and went to the Brockwood Park School, a Krishnamurti school in the UK. That education had a profound influence on Vishwas's life, both as a person and as an educator. Here are a couple of quotes from Krishnamurti that illustrate how he may have influenced a young Vishwas Parchuri in his early experiences that caused him to become an experiential educator later in life. When you are listening to someone completely, attentively, then you are listening not only to the words, but to the feeling of what is being conveyed, to the whole of it, not just part of it. There is no end to education. It's not that you read a book, pass an examination, and finish with education. The whole of life, from the moment you are born to the moment you die, is a process of learning. Today, Vishwas's students benefit from his depth of thinking, adventurous spirit, and thoughtful presence as an experiential educator. As you can glean from his biography, he is a master facilitator who puts his whole being into the art and science of his craft. He not only searches for ways to grow, but is open when those opportunities find him. His love of learning creates a magical container from which everyone can learn. He's created a 9-month course in India called DEEP, Diploma in Experiential Education and Practice, which has had a lasting impact in bringing experiential ed to another level in India. Here are just a few snippets from his students. He is guide on the side, respecting your views, allowing you to take your own time to learn and grow, never pushing his views on you, being there, listening with empathy. He is patient, kind, and wise, and has an incredible and sometimes frustrating ability to let you grapple and learn to stay with the big questions. Like many others, I've been allowed into Vishwas's class, home, and head. He shared his knowledge, his food, his time, and his reasoning for why he does something. All of this has contributed tremendously to my growth as a professional. In Vishwas, I found a mentor and dear friend who helped me work on my blind spots and build a new life. Deep helped my character, strengths, and unique abilities find new expression. It helped me celebrate myself and the light I bring to the world. His constant effort to outdo himself as an educator and relook at creating fresh perspectives makes him more of a learner who wants to take people along on a journey. And he lives experiential ed. He is intensely intentional. And Vishwas's influence in India continues to grow. Educators are aware of what we call the ripple effect. There are many ripples emanating from Vishwas's work as these teachers, therapists, trainers, counselors, and others fan out across India and beyond. From my perspective, Vishwas is an experiential educator from the inside out. He embodies an experiential philosophy and has connected that philosophy to research and theory. Although I have and will continue to sing Vishwas's praises, I want to make clear that he is also a great connector and networker. Vishwas does not work alone. He has traveled the globe to hone his craft with Play for Peace, Global Youth Leadership Institute, the Team Conference, AEE, and more. These travels have given him a unique perspective about experiential education. It has helped him to build a bridge between the rest of the world and India. And today that bridge goes both directions. Many of Vishwas's influences seem to be in direct contradiction to each other. Guru relationship versus personal responsibility. Building character through experience and service versus building character through internal meditation and reflection. Embracing fear versus being free from fear. Yet Vishwas's philosophy and practice treat these as two sides of the same coin, and then merges them into a coherent, elegant whole that both supports and challenges learners. Like Ewald and Hahn, he is not content to keep his life's work to himself, but shares it with others in ways that are uniquely his. And today we are the beneficiaries of that. It is clear to me that what once was a dynamic system of learning and education in India was broken through colonization. A Western form of education was superimposed on what used to be in India. Today, Vishwas and his colleagues are coming full circle. They're bringing it back through experiential education. It may not be exactly the same, but they are pulling back the layers of colonial educational practice and getting closer to what is truly an Indian philosophy of education, something that can be shared with the rest of us throughout the world and adding to the richness of what we do. Please join me in welcoming our Marina Ewald Hahn addressee and my friend Vishwas Parchuri.
It's hard to respond, but I have to say this, that I thank you for this honor. This moment certainly brings some discomfort, but also much joy. I particularly like this form of gift because there's no certificate, there's no plaque, there's nothing to reify this experience. The only real thing is us here together. Coincidentally, today is the biggest day on the Indian festival calendar. We call it Diwali, the festival of lights. It celebrates Goddess Lakshmi's coming in onto the earth to bless her devotees. People light lamps to welcome the goddess of wealth into their homes, and we burst a lot of firecrackers. So in case you hear any of them, I might put the mic off, but it'll be just for a second. It's also a day that celebrates the winning of good over evil. Now, what these words mean has changed over time, but I prefer to see it as the celebration of what gives life to ourselves and others. This 1 hour intends to encapsulate 30 years of being influenced by those that gave me life. Let me tell you at the start what I'm really good at. Copying, mimicking, picking up ideas from what I read, movies I watch, and people I meet. I'm also really good at forgetting where I got it from. Everything I have today came from somewhere, but I often have only the foggiest idea from where. So my disclaimer is that if your idea appears here in the many influences I have had, I thank you for it. I'm in your debt. I shall be eternally grateful, and you can take whichever idea you like from today and use it in whatever way you want. What I say may appear neither wise, exciting, nor very. Since we are all work in progress, these are a few of my favorite things today. I'm guessing they will change over time. You will notice that as we go through today, we decided to make this as experiential and fun as possible because we'd gone through many iterations of this speech. And we finally decided that, hey, you know what, let's just get collaborative with it. We are in the business of experiential education. We spend time and create experiences helping people to discover the value of experience and how to learn from those experiences. Interestingly, the articulation of my earliest experiences came quite late in my life, that I had a very privileged education. The more I encountered the struggles of an educator, the more I appreciated what I got. My very privileged early education was at a boarding school run by the Jiddu Krishnamurti Foundation. All the foundation schools across the globe are located on expansive areas of property. In my mind, this is what Jiddu Krishnamurti chose, why he chose to start these schools, to find out if it was possible to create a space in which children could grow up without fear. What a brilliant thought. I had the freedom to wander around the hills, climb trees, catch scorpions and snakes, frogs and cockroaches, and anything else that moved or we could get away with. A lot of that experience must have affected me.
Please hold for just a minute while we fix our technical error.
Just so you know, Eli is Vishwas, a good time to take a nice deep breath, it says, for those waiting.
Clip me. Okay. Well, technology at work. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Thank you. So, Jiddu Krishnamurti said that a school is a place where one learns about the totality, the wholeness of life. Academic excellence is absolutely necessary, but a school includes much more than that. That it's a place where both the teacher and the student explore not only the outer world, the world of knowledge, but also their own thinking and their own behavior. Education was always one of Krishnaji's chief concerns. He felt that if only the young and the old could be awakened to their conditioning of nationality, religion, prejudices, fears, and desires, which inevitably leads to conflict, they might bring to their lives a totally different quality. The world currently is at war. Borders are being threatened. Not just the imaginary lines dividing countries, but also race, color, ideology, and tolerance. It seems very clear that we need a greater awareness about how each one of us carries this seed of divisive thinking. Currently, we're becoming more polarized, and we have a choice about how we want the future to be. There is a need for an emergence of gurus, not the variety that claims authority and followership, but one that empowers others to discover themselves. The word guru comes from two words, gu, which means darkness, and ru, which means light. Someone who took you from darkness to light, from ignorance to understanding. The guru does not know where their light shines, nor do they care who finds the light to take themselves from their ignorance to understanding. For me, these gurus were not always people. They were imaginary characters from books, movies, and others' stories. I think Hahn certainly qualifies as one of those gurus for me. I read the story of his life in an article by Thomas James, such an immensely inspiring story. At this point, I would like to invoke the blessings of all those who have been my gurus and mentors, guides, and soulmates. The Om Sahana Vavatu mantra is chanted by teacher and student together at the start of a class or practice to invite divine blessings for whatever is to be studied. It is chanted 3 times. I would like you to join the chant wherever you might be. Keep your mics on mute. On screen, you will see the words in the English script. Listen to it in the first recitation, risk it in the second, and have fun with it in the third.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Tadavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu. Ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
So when I looked at this and the meaning of what it means, this is what came to mind. The elements that they talk about in this short chant we talk about every day when we do what we do as experiential educators. And the words that really got me were that they include the environment that the teacher and student are in, that it is a place where both are nourished, that the energy that's created by both the teacher and the student contribute to the activity that they're doing together, that hopefully at the end of it, there will be enlightenment of some kind, and that in the end, peace will be part of the entire process. This is how I choose to see the contribution of all the teachers I reached out to on my journeys. Many of them offered me the protection and safety of their homes. Our conversations energized and nourished my learning. We took road trips in the US and India, and I got a chance to see how they lived their personal philosophy of not only experiential education, but life itself. Like a lot of young people, I bumbled along through college and the early years of work. I was in a sales and marketing job, moving from selling spark plugs, typewriters, machine tools, and alcohol, through to early computers with 160 kilobyte floppy disks. I found my first passion at a ripe age of 32. I was teaching adults how to use computers. I told a lot of stories about the development of computing. And my favorite moment was writing on the board 1 GB, 1 gigabyte, is equal to 1 followed by 6 zeros kilobytes. At that point, it was inconceivable considering my whole organization's accounting all sat on one floppy disk of 160 kilobytes. I discovered I could tell stories well, holding people's attention, asking them questions about what something meant in the context of their lives. I loved the attention and the awe I created in their minds. And somewhere on that journey, I became more important than what I did. I think that's what took its toll on my body. I had to leave my job and all the trappings of an urban excessive lifestyle in a hurry. The cliche of people having that moment on top of a mountain was true for me. To get more clarity about what I needed to do, I went off for a week-long retreat into the Himalayas. One morning after breakfast, I took a bottle of water and took off to reach what I thought was the top of an adjacent mountain. Narrow trails, the thick air that only a pine forest can create, a gentle warm sun towards the end of winter, and a search for that mountaintop. Every time I thought I had reached, I saw another bump that was probably the top. I ran out of water, and before I knew it, it began to feel like it was getting cooler, and the sun seemed on the wrong side of 12 o'clock. I sat on a rock, looked down at the river. It seemed so far away. I had come there to make some serious decisions about what I was going to do with my life. And that seemed like it was the easy part. The hard part was what it was going to mean thereafter. This wonderful moment would have been a waste if I had not taken a commensurate risk. When you do something because you want to, it's amazing what it does to your courage. I walked into the door of education. The purpose of a door is to break the continuity of a separator between two spaces. It has a framework under which we walk. In my new role as a teacher, the door separated and who I became in the classroom. Every time I walked into that classroom, it felt like I was putting on a switch as I walked in and out of that door. That transformation disturbed me greatly. In the corridors, I wanted to be a friend, and it was okay for the kids to hang off my shoulders. In the classroom, all that wasn't okay. They needed to be like sparrows on a line. That's what we call a classroom. That decade of 89 to 99 is what anchored me to what we call learning from experience. I'd been trekking for a few years in the Nepal Himalayas. An opportunity to take 17-year-olds on a 7-day trip to the mountains presented itself. I did what all of us pay most attention to. How are we going to travel? What food are we going to eat? And what gear are we going to carry? I think I was quite unprepared to even articulate at that time what I saw. On flat ground, the usual dynamics of prevailed. The vociferous ones ruled. The quiet, unnoticed ones followed. As we began the climb to higher altitude, things started changing. The quiet ones came alive, reaching out to the ones that needed help. Their voices were more prevalent. Some of the heavier kids had to be dragged back from 15,000 feet. I wish I knew there was something called reflection then. What rich conversations we might have had. The mountains, I'm sure, spoke to many of them. There was a discernible change in their behavior back at school. More joy, deeper relationships, more conversation, and an accepting attitude to most things at school that they otherwise resisted, and certainly more receiving. My interest and joy of working with children and teenagers continued through my next assignment, which was to set up a learning resource center at a boys' school. When I joined, all I could see was angry young boys on the way to destruction. Physical bullying and punishment were rampant, and at the end of every term, on the night before they left for home for their holidays, they destroyed everything they could. Furniture, doors came off hinges, mattresses were torn apart. It was a night of revenge. Even the house parents kept their doors locked that night. It was way beyond any violence I had ever encountered. I wasn't directly connected to their academic progress, so they came to the center when they needed to access the library and during the recess to just chill. It seemed like it was a safe place for them, and I encouraged it by offering them activities that they had never encountered. As a result, they reached out in times of anger or hurt and pain or distress. I had no idea what it meant to counsel or facilitate a conversation, but I must have done something right because some of the relationships built then continue to this day. They still reach out. I think what I managed to do then was understand that I had no control over their lives or decisions they made. It was enough to offer them a shelter, a space where they could feel safe and share relationships in which they were neither judged nor measured. Around this time, I was given 4 pages photocopied from a book that many of us are familiar with. Reading them confirmed some of those experiences I had with young people, and in a huge way was the foundation of how I saw what I was doing for the next 4 years. Many years later, I did eventually get my hands on the book, Islands of Healing. I continued to trek and conduct camps for young people, and my ability to keep them engaged over a week improved. I used every conceivable form I could get my hands on to make the activities engaging without using competition of any kind to get the adrenaline rush that people seem to want. Construction, engineering, architecture, art, music, theater, adventure, orienteering, rope tricks, poetry. I do often think I did some of my best work then. Everything was a journey into the unknown. I took a lot of risks, probably because there was no one to judge my work. This whole form was new to everyone and it was received very well. 1996 was probably the most eventful year of my life. While people were dying on Everest that April, made famous by that film Into Thin Air, I was on my first serious mountaineering expedition on another 8,000-meter peak, Dhaulagiri. Everything that could have gone wrong for me did. The same bad weather hit us for a week. We were snowed in at about 20,000 feet. I had the wrong size boots, blisters on my feet, and by the end of the week, all my gear was wet. I accepted defeat and ran back home. I think it was because I had much time by myself in that tent that I did some serious reflection. It was a rich experience, and I have been deriving different lessons ever since. A wonderful example of how learning from an experience can transfer for years after. Somewhere in between that year, I was busy in dialogue with another guru who created an opportunity for me that I have always been grateful for. At that time, Steve Lenartovich was at this place in Ambleside, England, called the Brede Hall Trust. They were holding a conference titled Development Training 2000. He invited me to present a talk on outdoor education in India. I had no idea that such a thing existed called outdoor education, but it made sense that the outdoor camps that I was running fell into that category. I was a poor school teacher by choice and told him that there was no way I could make it to England because the ticket was 6 months' pay. After many exchanges by snail mail, we agreed that if I could make my way there, he would further my education by allowing me to stay and shadow the children's and corporate workshops that Brede ran. I believe I was mastering what I have since called the art of beggary. It's a simple 2-step act. 1, ask for what you want. Feel no shame. Everybody wants something, but also be ready to give. 2, stay detached from the outcome. Don't feel bad if they say no. If nothing else, it's an exercise in understanding humility. The short story is that I did attend the conference and met an amazing number of wonderful people. I saw books at the stall, and many of those authors were speakers at the conference. I couldn't really afford the books. It was too early in the journey to be spending money I didn't have. So I went up to Simon Priest, we're all familiar with his work, and told him my story about what I was doing. I don't remember him saying much then, but when I returned months later, there were 2 parcels waiting for me from him. About 10 books in all, and the beginning of my library. It contained some of his own work and iconic books such as Cowtails and Cobras, Silver Bullets, Quicksilver, the New Youth Games book, and Islands of Healing. Life has never been the same. Another instance of the Guru's light taking me from darkness. Here's the story I love to tell because it humbled me greatly and influenced much of my own attitude. It was a lesson worth learning. After the conference, I had a few days off. I had struck a relationship with this wonderful British gentleman that many of you may have heard of, Chris Loynes, one of the sharpest intellects I have met, and as gentle as he's sharp. He invited me over to hang out with him over the weekend. On the way, we stopped by at his office. At that time, he was publishing a magazine called the Journal of Adventure Education and Outdoor Leadership. While we were there, I saw shelves lined with books on topics I had just discovered. Can you hear me? Okay. I asked him if I could photocopy some of that stuff, and he said, sure, here are the books. There's the copy machine. The coffee machine is in that corner. At the end of 2 hours, I was still at it, and when he asked if I was ready to go, he had been watching what I was doing, I guess, so he opened a little window of opportunity. He asked if I wanted to copy more, and I opened the door for myself. I spent the night in his office. I had a sleeping bag with me, copying anything and everything I thought I might be able to use immediately or understand years from then. Who does stuff like that? I have no idea which part of him allowed me to be trusted with his entire office, but he did. As if that wasn't enough, he gifted me 10 years of the journal's back issues. I treasure them to this day. There are many more stories and learning about humility and attachment I could tell, but let me just say this. There was absolutely no good reason in my mind for any of those people, Steve Lenardovich, Simon Priest, Chris Loynes, or John Hall, to do what they did. I was just a wandering middle-aged Indian in search of the truth behind why and how this thing called outdoor or adventure education works. But they did extend a welcome, food, a roof, friendship, and numerous mind-blowing conversations. What was the principle here? Give. If someone gifts you something, receive with gratitude, joy, and without burden. To be burdened by a gift is to dishonor it. No preamble, no postscript, unconditional. That same year of 96, I got married and had my first son. It seems the year grew longer just for all these things to happen. My younger son arrived a few years later. Both are in the film and media domain, and that's what we look like today. On my return from England, life was not to be the same. I think all that new stuff had a deep effect. I had outgrown the school I was working in. A friend offered me a piece of land to set up a campsite and starting money to purchase equipment. Other friends donated equipment and time. 3 years of running the operation had earned me enough to finally make a trip to the US for the AEE conference that many of you were at, I think, at Rochester. That 2-month visit would be the beginning of another decade of revelations that would infect and add to the building of an approach that is certainly influenced by the West, primarily because all the literature is from there. I'm not sure whether my practice is Eastern or Western. I do know that with my travels to different cultures, the key was to adapt both language and methodology. All that adapting must have contributed to developing an approach that was local to India. And the idea that I had a personal philosophy came only through the insights of another. 99 and my first AEE International Conference and visit to the US. I walked into it jet-lagged, cold, and the visuals of a live America stayed burned in my memory. Lots of, how you doing? Ice instead of water, carpeted floors, gigantic buildings, and spiceless food. What happened one evening while leaving the conference center was to influence my work and approach forever. Walking out through the conference center, I heard a lot of noise that's now the familiar sound of people singing, dancing, and energizing. I stood by the door, watching, smiling at all these grown-ups being childlike. Laurie Frank invited me in to join the fun. Little did I know what I was letting myself in for. Over the next hour, I experienced Play for Peace and made the deal with Michael Terrian and Craig Dobkin, familiar names to many of us, to take the program back to India. It was that simple. I mentioned, ask for it and you will get it. Over the next few weeks, I would travel with Play for Peace, contingent to Cape Town for the Parliament for World Religions gathering. It was a first-hand experience of how the model works. Over the next decade, I would travel the world training groups that were interested in incorporating the Play for Peace approach in their work. Those years, I played a lot. When I wasn't doing Play for Peace, I was earning a livelihood in corporate training. There too, I played a lot. At the time, corporate training in India was a pretty drab affair, mostly PowerPoint discourses. Why don't you just sit down?
Just sit. It's probably hot there.
I need that.
चालू झालं मग टाकायचं
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, cool. I just love this technology at work. Thank you for being so patient. Okay, so if you can hear me and you can't see me, I guess that's fine. So I'm just going to keep chatting anyway. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sure.
That's great,
Okay.
Vishwas.
Okay. Corporate training at that point was a pretty drab affair, mostly PowerPoint discourses. When it was outdoors, it was all problem-solving tasks. No play or laughter at all. When I introduced dancing and singing, my colleagues wondered how I got those corporate executives to follow. But I liked to sing and dance and laugh, and as long as I was doing that, my audience didn't mind looking silly either. Play is a wonderful way to build a sense of community really quickly. Between 99 and 2009, I attended and presented workshops at 7 international and regional AE conferences. I always took time off before and after to spend time with 5 of my gurus who graciously offered their homes as as a shelter. I would like to honor their contributions to their life. Laurie Frank has been a dear friend since she invited me into that Play for Peace room. She's been the source of much of my library, generously donating the books and toys that sharpen my gaming ability. Those who know have also experienced her down-to-earth approach. The simplicity and sharpness of her wisdom shines bright. Every visit, we would go do a road trip for a few days, seeing the country. She would introduce me to the most remarkable people in the Mohican Nation. And of course, we would talk. Oh, welcome back. She's been to India 4 times and we would do the same thing here. She was the nudge I think I needed to start teaching what I knew. Till not so long ago, I described myself as a pretty good replicator. Anytime I felt like I was in a corner, I would ask myself, what would Laurie do in this situation? She showed me that I wasn't just replicating because what she witnessed wasn't what she was doing, although I claim to have learned it from her. Through those many hours of conversation, I understood that I had my own style and that I needed to nurture that. Those conversations and reflection on what that personal philosophy might be has given me enormous courage to stay adventurous in my practice. In Chris Cavert, I saw dedication, perseverance, and a giving nature. I thought I was good at many things in the gaming domain till I saw him at work. Those who know of his work will appreciate that what he does is not easy. To present play in a structured, simple, understandable, and yet elaborate manner and stir all of it with creativity must take hours to concoct. Last December, we invited Chris Cavert and Carla Hacker to India to do workshops over a period of 3 weeks. It was a treat watching them in preparation and then being open to outcome once the show began. It's not easy to understand the vibe of a new culture. We had 400 people attend, and I think it has made a huge difference to our understanding of what it really means to prepare for, run an activity, and process it meaningfully, crossing cultural borders as well in the process. Carla's fun ways and responses to people in a hurry to know what was next while something was still going on has become an Indian thing. And she would say, in a minute, but just not yet. From John Guarin, I learned humility and the importance of a playful heart. If you are joyful, the world will smell it. There's a certain wisdom in play when you act silly in a serious room. I learned from him the value of dialogue. To be able to have a conversation in which you may have an opinion, but the most important thing in that moment is being alive to how you are receiving. From Sam Tower, I learned that age isn't much of a thing. It will do to you what it must, and we just have to do what we can and keep doing it. I'm still learning from his life the importance of working with one's hands and staying hands-on in my practice. From Ron Levis, I learned the art of the pause. I met Ron on a trek in Nepal in '95. We've stayed friends ever since. The pause is a place of churning, of heightened consciousness. I find that when a gap can be created between wanting to express an opinion and exploring with curiosity, one-way streets become 10-lane highways. It takes away the thought jams and the honking. Before I run out of time, I have to share with you what appears to be my current view about what I do. I have been teaching what I call my version of experiential education for the past 10 years. It takes different forms depending on the audience. Most people just love learning new activities, and by teaching that, I think I directly contributed to what I think is a failure in the practice of experiential education. Many of us have also begun our practice with groups by running activities. What I also noticed is that a lot of us are still stuck there. Then came a phase when groups attending the gaming workshops requested that I run the activity and also process it. We know the importance of the reflective process. I had a lot of fun with it and really enjoyed the risk of having to get my processing right in the presence of peers. I learned a lot, and I don't think they did as much. It began to feel very uncomfortable after a while, like I was showcasing something for 2 days. That's when I began to move the responsibility to the participants, inviting them to process the activities. It was like starting the bus, then handing over the steering and different pedals to the participants to regulate speed and define destination. Watching their struggle to decide what to process, when to process, and then finding the right question, I realized how complicated it all gets. For the present, I have decided that the act of processing an experience cannot be taught. At its simplest, processing involves 3 pieces. The facilitator, the questions that the facilitator chooses to ask are deeply connected to who they are, where they come from, the ideas and opinions they are attached to, their training, the degree of comfort or risk they feel in the setting, expectations from the group and the organization, how much they understand their group and the culture they come from, and definitely their own life experiences. 2, the question with its explicit and implicit intentions, and the 3rd, the listener with their desires and needs. All 3 have their own unspoken and expressed agendas. The questioner wants to satisfy his patron, their patron, for a longer relationship and repeat business. They want to be seen doing a satisfactory job with their audience, to be seen as capable, reliable, affable, and intelligent. They also want to do a good job influencing and changing their clients' behaviors so as to justify the investment and showing return on investment. With so many agendas to satisfy, it must affect their processing capability. In having to please so many involved parties and oneself, I wonder if the reflective questions can emerge with any incisiveness and integrity. Too often, it becomes an act of playing power and politics in the act of facilitation. I'm guessing we all have played victim to this situation. It's the meeting of an unstoppable force with an immovable object. Eventually, it appears that the biggest loser is the facilitator. In this medley of agendas, how does one manage building a personal philosophy? A personal philosophy, to me, is the guiding light and comes from a conviction that what one does and answering the question, why am I doing what I'm doing? Not just once in a while, but every time that one gets into that immensely responsible place of facilitating. That personal philosophy is the guiding light that cannot come from the guru outside you. It must come from the guru within. I think many of us have discovered, and sometimes the hard way, that asking questions is difficult enough. Asking that brilliant question that is short, sharp, simple, and sweet is a long journey. Like so many other things, I see that a lot of people want to come to that place immediately in their next processing question. Not getting there becomes frustrating and many give up. I also saw that I could come up with 50 questions to ask, and I wrote them down during my preparation before the program. When it came to that moment of asking, I had no idea which was the best question. I could either stay stuck to one of those 50 or just throw that out and respond with what was real here and now. The only thing I could depend on was my preparation and my ability to stay with what was happening with the group and to be me in the present. Plan to death and then throw it away. What seemed to happen was that my questions became more real, relevant, and meaningful to the present audience. My questions became sharper, shorter, more exploratory, and in the context of what was currently transpiring with the group. There was one glitch, though. I noticed that I still had threads connected to two things. One, my agenda, what I wanted to see happen, and two, whom I brought into that moment. My past, my desires, biases, prejudices, attachments, education, training, and history. And add to that the need for control over outcomes. This latter piece seemed much bigger. It implied that there was no way I could separate myself from the processing and must therefore influence it in some way. Who I was, how I presented myself, how I was feeling, my moods, my anxieties, my nervousness, feelings, all mattered. That is when I found my personal philosophy helped me sail through the storm. I am ever grateful to Laurie Frank for pointing me in that direction. Around this time of exploration, I met another wonderful gentleman, Colin Beard. He's the co-author of the book, The Power of Experiential Learning, in which he describes 6 tumblers as in a combination lock. How's it going so far? A thumbs up just to indicate whether you're enjoying yourself. Okay,
Absolutely.
I see some hands going like this. Are you still there?
Yes, Vishwan.
Okay. Thank you. I needed to use that pause to take a drink of water. So pay attention because this is my new philosophy. Okay. Right. So Colin Beard describes 6 tumblers as in a combination lock. And that lock describes how we can choose a combination of elements when we create experiences in the participants' outer world. They receive the experience through their senses. How they receive the experience will influence what they feel and think. These affect the person's inner being. The choices they make about how to respond to that experience will depend on what they want to become. This whole process he describes as the inner world. If we assume that many of us make these choices because we have a great need to belong, and we talk a lot about building community, The manifestation of that inner world need shows itself in the outer world, where they engage with their immediate groups that they are a part of: family, friends, teams, community, organization, and society. The participants all come with this need to belong, but they come with different desires and agendas that we may never discover or know. As educators, we now have this responsibility of finding that out so that we can present appropriate experiences for them. I've been playing with these ideas for some time, and it surprises me that many of us claim to be in the business of changing someone else to be something we or others think is right. Probably most as parents, we want our children to do or not do certain things, say or not say certain things, to be someone we think will be a better person. Organizations want this too. Strangely, if they didn't want this, most of us would be out of business. I think we all know that changing another is impossible. Yet, who I am can be a huge influence on whether someone wants to change or not. For me, that kind of got complicated. Theoretically, it meant that I needed to do some serious work on myself first. But everyone's looking for a quick fix when it comes to processing another's experience, wanting to be able to ask the 4S questions so that we can help initiate change in someone else. So, one day, Colin Beard says to me, "Hey, I'm doing some work with the Singapore Outward Bound instructors. They want a module on professionalism. I think it means different things in different cultures. Could you do it?" I didn't tell him then that professionalism, along with maturity and some others, were words I abhorred. I said yes and began building a word web with professionalism in the center. It grew larger by the day as I invited others to join this word game. Around that time, OB Singapore was going really big and introducing outdoor education into all schools, which meant that about 40,000 young people would be attending week-long camps at the OB Center. What Outward Bound wanted was to get its instructors to understand that they needed to present themselves with great professionalism. What that means varies between cultures. One of the pieces in that was carrying the values that OB upheld at all times, because they were going to be around very impressionable minds. Not different from a lot of us working with organizations. To me, that meant a lot more than just wearing clean clothes, keeping a clean nose, and appropriate safe practices that children see. It translated with a whole new sense of being. I was sure that they already had a lot of safe practices and I didn't need to. What I saw was a chance to share perspective about what eventually affects how they choose to carry themselves. Back to the word web. Like so many things, if you spend enough time with something, even if you didn't want to do it for building clarity, over time, the fog seems to clear. The way it happened for me was that I began to see a pattern. All those words began to fall into three buckets. What's going on inside is built over years of experience, upbringing, education, training, practice, biases, opinions, exposure, travel, family, society, fears, joys. It's a conglomerate of all the stuff we've collected till this moment. Over time, we keep collecting stuff into this bucket. A lot of this part of the human mind we don't even know and have yet to understand. What we do know is that it influences how we see and relate to the here and now. This I call conditioning. Jiddu Krishnamurti says, for centuries, we have been conditioned by nationality, caste, class, tradition, religion, language, education, literature, art, custom, convention, propaganda of all kinds, economic pressure, the food we eat, the climate we live in, our family, our friends, our experiences, every influence you can think of, and therefore our responses to every problem is conditioned. The world judges your professionalism based on what they see about you. Your features, color, language, accent, the way you dress, gestures, mannerisms, and a lot more. These traits are often seen as an expression of what's going on inside. I decided to call this conduct. What I think tends to happen is that in most of our responses, we allow our conditioning to leak into our conduct. If my nature is to react angrily to something I don't like, every encounter will bring about a similar response to varying degrees. Not much thinking going on. Over years of practice, we display the same responses whenever we sense threat. There is one saving grace, though. Ever so often, just before we do or say something, we see that it may not be the best way to respond to the situation in that moment, that other ways exist. Maybe the answer to alternate ways of responding was in that gap between how my conditioning wanted to respond and how I could change my response. June Blanc puts it interestingly. See if any of these sound familiar to what you do. When I react negatively, oh, it just happens. It's like a trigger and off I go. I'm not sure why I react the way I do. I can't help myself. It's just how I am. That gap between conditioning and conduct, I decided to call consciousness. When my consciousness about where I am, who I am responding to, what it's about, is thin, I respond from the old conditioned pattern. To be able to respond from a new and different place, I need to expand my consciousness. Think of it as a balloon that fills up in that moment. And one of the ways to do that was to use the pause. Use it to get to the present, here and now. That's the only real thing. The choice we make is whether we want to bring our conditioning or our consciousness into play to our professionalism. I'd like to swing back to Collins' model to build the relevance of this consciousness. We have seen the inner world of the participant. That is an area of no control. Susan Kowalik says, emotions are the gateway to learning. How they feel is how they will learn. If we cannot will our participants to feel good about what we present to them, that's a choice they make. They have the key to that part of the lock. So what do we have control over? Our area of control is the outer world. That is where participants encounter the what they are doing, where and with whom they're doing it. They also meet who is doing it. I'm seeing that we have paid a lot of attention to the what and the where. We think that the key to invite change is powerful experiences and hope that something will happen. I now see that the who is a huge part of how participants receive the experience. A quote that comes to mind is, consciously we teach what we know, unconsciously we teach who we are. I seriously think all of us need to pay more attention to who we are. The who we are can shift only when we expand that bubble of consciousness to be able to receive our audiences in the present. That means parking our own biases, prejudices, opinions, and receiving what is with our participants in the present. One last story to finish. I had this opportunity to do some work with Matt Nink and the Global Youth Leadership Institute with young adults in Costa Rica some years ago. The gathering was opened with an hour-long chat with the group by a gentleman who I remember as Eric Lillian Stolman. I have not been able to find him since. He did his thing and left me in the middle of what has been the longest storm. I don't know if he said all this, but this is what I got from it. And these are my 4 mantras that remind me of what could be. Another guru whose words led me from my darkness to the light. So here are my 4 mantras. If you want to learn anything at all, 1, get uncomfortable. That is where the learning is. 2, answers to the big ones lie with everyone. Everyone has a solution to another's big problems in life. When you have a challenge in your life that you feel you cannot resolve alone, go ask another. They will offer you a solution. 3, we are a lot more alike than we think. You know, we often think we are unique, and I'm sure we are, but not that different from one another. Ask 25 people for a solution to a problem, and you will maybe get 4 different ones. Something to remember when we work with groups. And 4, we don't always live by our values. Give. This last one, I've been making new meaning over the years. It's easy to point a finger at another when what they say or do disagrees with you. Much easier and less violent to forgive, because we also often enough fail to live by our own values. So forgive others, forgive yourself. It'll be a much gentler world. I would like to leave you with a couple of questions. 1, do you have a personal philosophy about your practice? 2, do your gurus know about what they have done for you? How will you share your gratitude for what they did for you or said to you that changed the way you see your world today? And 3, what will you do to to shine the light on the ignorance in your life. Do it today. Stay safe, keep others safe, and have a wonderful, enlightening life ahead. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Vishwas, thank you so much. That was amazing. I'd like everybody to unmute right now and show appreciation.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
Thank you so much.
So great.
Amazing. Yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tumambara
πολύ.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vishwas.
Thank you. We want to make sure that you have a moment and a chance to show your appreciation and talk to Vishwas, Madhvi and Chetan, who have been there with Vishwas to facilitate this. We thank you so much. They are going to go into the gather area. So on your attendee dashboard, find Gather Together. That is our virtual space where you can actually see people by video. You can walk around, but Vishwas is going to be there for the next half hour, 10 minutes, whatever he can manage. It is getting late there and it is a holiday. So, but he will be there, and please go there and talk to him, show your appreciation. This was amazing talk, and we really appreciate it. Don't forget, live workshops start at 12:30. We have our closing this evening. You all are amazing. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.